Chris Cuomo here. Welcome to NewsNation. This is where right and left come to try to be reasonable. Now, tonight we have new information about the January 6th bomber suspect. Of course, that's what should matter most, right? The reporting about this suspect shows exactly how common this homegrown threat of political violence through actions on extreme thought is getting. But we've been distracted from that story by another major threat, manufactured division, as evidenced by the FBI's number 1 and 2 pretending they solved the January 6th bomber case when they were two of the most outspoken conspiracists that the bomber would never be found because it was an inside job. People see the obvious hypocrisy at play here, like I do, and they don't want to let it go. But let me be clear about a couple of things, okay? I'm not looking for scalps. I'm not about rage bait. I see an opportunity to help expose what is wrong with our politics and an opportunity to get somewhere better. But that is not easy, right? Nobody wants to ever admit any kind of weakness because you guys will, the social media world will kill you for it. So today, Patel and Bongino doubled down because that's what you do, right? Bongino posted, "I was today years old when I discovered media figures were unaware that I was a political opinion commentator before my tenure here." The message seems to be that what he used to say was just entertainment. Now, that's not my opinion. It's his.
You put a post on X right after this happened, and you said there's a massive cover-up because the person that planted those pipe bombs, they don't want you to know who it is because it's either a connected anti-Trump insider or an inside job.
I was paid in the past, Sean, for my opinions. That's clear, and one day I'll be back in that space. But that's not what I'm paid for now. I'm paid to be your deputy director, and we base investigations on facts.
On facts. But so he didn't used to do that. Because he used to say he said, he knew, he heard, right? So I hope you all take that in. Everything they were telling you about Epstein, about January 6th, about the deep state, about the elections, all those things that got your blood boiling, they were doing it for entertainment purposes. That's the new excuse. And Patel is now the number 1 at the FBI, and he's still doing it. He went on with the president's son as the head of the FBI and still played to conspiracies that the guy they just discovered was being covered up, which he absolutely knows to be false. Now, unlike a lot of other critics, I'm not coming at these guys to take them down. I want the fakery to stop, and they are in a very unique position. They are guys who were part of the pod problem, who now have power to call it out and be about something different. Full disclosure, I met Dan Bongino. I liked him. And now he is in a position like Patel. But by the way, I don't think Patel has the stones that Dan Bongino does to own this and to be about something bigger than just a little bit of shame, okay? At a minimum, I believe that both of them owe it to the president, if not to the people. By refusing to acknowledge all the stuff that he and Patel sold about Epstein and the January 6th and a lot of other things, they're putting the president in a bad spot. President Trump is forced to own what they refuse to. That is not fair to the president. He gifted them with jobs, and it is doing a disservice to the president's ability to get things done for the American people. For example, the president is going on an affordability tour starting next week. I think this could be the most important moment of this administration to date. But the conversation that we should be having is likely going to be derailed by the deceptions of his disciples. That's not fair to the president, and it's not fair to you, who absolutely cares more about affordability than any of this other stuff. There was no good reason for these two to pretend that Biden hid who this guy was. I don't think that explains the delay. I don't believe this was discovered by some new team. And I do believe they are intentionally disrespecting the men and women at the FBI who did the work that led to this guy's capture. Okay? Now, in terms of who's making things up, they did, not people at the FBI. Not President Biden. Remember, the FBI was led during his administration by Christopher Wray, the guy that Trump picked in his first administration. It's a fact these two chose to ignore, and you know why. Because they always ignore facts when it doesn't suit their misinformation. And again, I disagree with people who say Bongino, Patel, Hegseth. I don't think they're the same. The Secretary of War is a much more complicated and contrived situation, and he has a much higher degree of compunction. I get why people are hunting his scalp. I don't think that should be the importance of the moment. I think it should be about Congress taking power over military action from the presidency. But I'll just say this. Secretary Hegseth is really lucky that President Trump has a tendency to stand by his people if his opponents call for their heads. But the FBI bros, they can come clean and get a win. They can stick a fork in all the social media rage bait. They can own their role and say, look, I know what they're doing. I was doing it. And be part of leading with facts and lean into how they got this guy. And what we know about him, which we're going to do in a moment anyway, because this is the #1 national security threat, homegrown extremism. And I know that they get it, okay? Because they know the price that President Trump has been forced to pay for the Epstein files. They created them as a boogeyman. It's now blown up on the president and put him in a terrible position. And now the FBI is doing all this redacting on the Epstein files that almost certainly is going to hatch a secondary scandal. And again, I'm not making this up. I'm not exaggerating to make a point. I'm not taking things out of context. Feeding conspiracies and distrust and division was their business model, as it was for many, and this is the proof, and I could show it to you for hours.
I told you from the start, the FBI is a fully now corrupt organization. This agency serves no good purpose anymore. The agency needs to be disbanded.
They're going to start releasing information now about the bomber, which was an inside job. It was clearly some Democrat operative.
Do you think the Federal Bureau of Investigation can't find a bomber in the United States of America? Or there was some government ruse or some FBI rogue source?
Are these the same 51 intelligence officers who falsely bullshitted America? These scumbags, a bunch of scumbag. I want an investigation into this conspiracy to steal the 2020 election. And no, we shouldn't let it go. I don't want to hear shit about, oh, it's time to move on. I think Jeffrey Epstein may have some videotape of people central to the Democrat and maybe Republican Party doing some things, let's just say they shouldn't be doing. He may have been working with foreign intelligence services.
You say that the FBI has Epstein's list. They're sitting on it. Why is the FBI protecting the greatest pederast in human history?
Simple, because of who's on that list.
The deep state is real. It's not some, silly euphemism for a conspiracy theory. Folks, forget impeachment. Joe Biden should be in prison. Joe Biden belongs in handcuffs. This guy should be investigated for possible treason.
And look, I get some of you would rather defend them because you want those things to be true, okay? And a lot of you will defend them by saying, oh, Cuomo, you do the same thing, or you did it at CNN. Look, I disagree. And if you ask leaders on the right and left, they have never seen me as being on their team, and I never will be. And I'll tell you what bothers me about this, okay? What they did is easy. If I were to pick a team, I would do exactly what they did. I don't like the system, I don't like the parties, but they're not equal. And one cares about America, and the other one, fill in the blank of some evil motivation, and then you go all in on one side and you attack the other. And let me tell you something. My podcast would go from 600,000 to 6 million, and NewsNation's ratings would likely pop. And I'd get written about a lot more, and I'd be making a lot more money. But you know what? I've made money. And what matters to me is seeing what is clearly killing us and calling it out. And I know that it's not as good a business model, but it's got to be about something more than that. And now for these two, it can be. They made their money, okay? They made their money. These guys were picking sides for profit, and that is killing us. And that's why they did it. You see the dollar sign in Cash's little brand that he puts out? I mean, forget about the irony of his name, but he literally uses a dollar sign as the S. Bongino reportedly made $100 million for his piece of the platform that he grew by doing exactly that. So I appeal to these guys, specifically Bongino, because I think he has the stones to do this. And I know he gets it. How? He used a passage from Teddy Roosevelt that's famously known as the man in the arena, okay? It's not the critic who counts, it's the man who's in there who takes the hits. It's not the people on the outside who just judge him for it. This means everything to me. This passage is why I left ABC News and jumped into the toxic pool of cable television, was because I wanted to be the man in the arena. I wanted to fight the good fight. Except Dan gets the meaning of the passage wrong. You are not the man in the arena because you get called out for doing what you know you did wrong. He, Patel, the Pod Bros, they are the critics who count too much. And we're dividing and are dividing for dollars. The man in the arena takes the hits for fighting the good fight. The good fight is owning what you were about then versus now. The good fight is relieving President Trump of having to own your profitable perfidy and showing people they don't have to be suckered by rage bait anymore. Roosevelt gave that speech in France to make the point that democracy depends on citizens. Citizens having the strength to do the right thing no matter the price. Now, both of these guys have always said that what they were saying was because they were patriots. On his shirt, it would always liberty and freedom. I submit to you, they were not being patriotic. They were being patronizing, selling people things that are now coming back to haunt them and the president and the rest of us. Now is a chance to show that you are really a patriot. That is all I'm going to say about it, okay? The point is clear. You know where I am on it, and you know that I think this could be a moment that could be used to do something better than where we are. As proof that here we focus on what matters, I'm bringing in a better mind to talk about what we now know about this bombing suspect and what we still need to know, all right? Little tidbits. Brian Cole confessed to planting the bombs at the two headquarters. It was reported he was an anarchist, but today there were reports that he says he's a Trump supporter. I know that matters so much to people, but only for the rage bait, only to say which side owns him. That's not what matters to me. What matters to me is understanding what got him to the point to think that he had to be violent to attack the system because he hates the country. Because that's what we keep seeing again and again and again. So I want to bring in former FBI agent and counter-terror expert Chris Piehota. And to prove that, look, this is not a scalp contest. Dan and I have a friend in common, Eric Bolling, okay, a known conservative and a longtime friend of the deputy FDI director, and he is here to defend Dan Bongino. So, Eric, thank you for coming on. It's very good to have you, Chris. Let's start with Dan, and then we'll go into the investigation. Eric, again, what I think is what you just heard. What do you want me to know?
I think you're spot on, Chris. I think you were, but allow me just to, and you always do this, you ask the tough questions, but you allow some debate on is there context here? And I think the context here really is we went through almost 5 years of this investigation, 4 of them under Joe Biden, and within a few months, 8, 9 months of Dan and Cash, because really the first few months when you're put into the seat as director and deputy director, it takes a while to get to know the system, But what Dan did, and this was missed in the very good monologue, Dan was the one who realized that for 4+ years, the group that was investigating the Jan 6 pipe bomber was failing. They weren't pushing the envelope at all. And he flipped it. He moved it to a group that he felt would be more effective. And guess what happens? They solved the case. Well, there's so much more to go. And I just, the only caution I would say is, yes, Dan was a commentator. Yes, Dan used heightened rhetoric, but we all do on this side. When I say this side, I used to be on your side as well, Chris, in front of the cable news cameras. Now I'm in the digital world. You push the envelope a little because it does bring eyeballs. Now, give Dan a chance. All right, and I'm saying Dan specifically because I'm not sure where Cash is on all this, but give Dan a chance to fully investigate. Now they've linked the pipe bomb to this guy, both of them to this guy. It looks, but there's no solid motive. I mean, people are speculating on, was it election fraud that bothered him? Let them do their job now. Maybe we'll know more. And maybe some of the things that you kind of trashed Dan over, maybe they'll start to come into focus a little bit and maybe have somewhat of a role in the actual events and facts, evidence, so to speak.
Well, look, I'm all for them doing the job. I'm all for learning about this. The idea that we're going to learn that they were right about what he now basically admits he was making up for profit, which is that they were never going to find this guy because they already knew who he was and he was an inside Democratic plant. All I'll say, Eric, that the facts inform us about your theory is none of the evidence that his new team, which I don't believe exists, I think he shifted it maybe to other guys, but they were all there working, the same people he and Cash used to trash, is that
Chris,
all the evidence they used on this guy is not new, Eric. They didn't develop any new evidence. They've had this evidence for years.
You have no actual knowledge of whether or not Dan, who says he did move it from a group that was investigating this perpetrator to another group that he had confidence in. We don't know. I think he did. And here's the other part. They had sweeping changes in the last 11 months in the FBI. They moved a lot of people out, took retirements from a lot of FBI agents and moved some more people in that they trust.
Be that as it may, look, they said themselves, none of this was new evidence. It was stuff that they decided to move on and when the last administration didn't, even though it was run by the same guy that Trump had picked. But look, we'll get to why they didn't act.
Evidence. You just
I want to know why. I want to get why they didn't act. Right, but that doesn't mean a new team found new evidence.
All right, but it's a very
I'm
important
with you. I'm with you. I agree with that. And look, let them do their job. I just think Dan could do something much bigger than this one case, which is help us with the biggest problem in our politics. All right, Mr. Piehota, you've listened to these one handsome man and me long enough. Look, forget about who figured it out. What we need to figure out. I don't really care about motive in terms of I'm a lefty or I'm a Trumper. I don't really care about that. The number one national security threat that we have that you know well, Chris, is extremism, homegrown, and acting on it in political violence. This guy checks every one of those boxes with what they've told us about him. Where do they need to take it and what matters to you?
Well, right now, what matters to me most is you're right. This is not a left or right matter. This is a matter for the United States justice system. That's where this lies, and that's where the skilled, objective, apolitical, and professional application of the law reigns. So the political parts of this and all the nonsense and the posturing on TV and everything, that to me is distractions. So what has to happen now is they have to figure out what moved this individual from an ideological place to a place of physical action where he was willing to construct what I consider, what I've been told are viable devices that had energetic materials that could have detonated. For whatever reason, we're lucky, whether it was his incompetence or whatever, that neither device was activated. So we're glad for that. But they have to figure out what moved him from that state of mind to state of action. And they also have to figure out, they're going to be looking at, how did he learn how to do this? What else, who else has he dealt with? Was he parts of any other networks or groups of people, friends, people that would be interested in this type of activity? One last comment for now. You're right. Extremism in all parts of our society has become a major problem where we can no longer have an objective dialogue and a respectful dialogue. Even in the justice system, we're looking at things being, politicized and moved toward more of a partisan position. What we have here is an individual who broke the law. He put people's lives and welfare in danger, and he has to be prosecuted for it under our justice system.
Let me ask you one quick thing that goes to Eric and my curiosity. What do you want to know to help explain why it took the time it did to make this accusation on him?
Oh, absolutely. I'm surprised that it took this long for this current investigative effort, that it wasn't achieved sooner. I went through my own checklist, and was it a lack of resources? Was it a lack of priority? Was it investigative incompetence? Or was it a leadership failure inside the FBI? And I heard somebody say something, well, the Biden administration suppressed this. I don't believe that. I think that's nonsense. I don't think the former president or any of his senior people gave any overt indication that this was to be suppressed. I think that's ridiculous. What I look at as a I look at a systematic and systemic failure inside the FBI, and when
we don't
Cashin,
have to, okay.
Yeah, but it is, because they're the ones who had the investigative responsibility, and they weren't able to resolve it until now.
Listen, I agree with you. I also agree with Eric. I want to know why it took this long. Eric, I give you the last word. Chris Piehota, it's good to have you on the show. We'll do it again. Last thought, Eric.
Yes, Chris, I really appreciate we having this discussion. It's really important. So no new evidence for 4 years under the Biden administration. They couldn't figure it out. Bongino and Cash, who else, figured it out in a few months after they got their feet under them at the FBI. So it's either one of two things. It's either political or gross incompetence by the original investigative team. And I will say probably more political, because I keep going back to those Strzok and Page at the FBI promising that they weren't going to allow a guy named Donald Trump to ever become president at the FBI.
Well, remember, this agency was run by Trump's guy, Christopher Wray, who only became a bad guy in your circles when he stopped doing everything that Trump wanted him to do. He's a lifelong conservative. But look, I'm open to the answers, and I'll tell you what, I owe you an appearance. I'll come on your show. We'll keep the conversation going. And please, tell Dan it's not personal. If I had his number, I would reach out to him. I think he can be part of getting us to a better place. He knows where we were. He made his money.
He knows we're having the discussion. I will talk to him afterwards, and he'll see it.
Right. It's just, I wish him nothing but success. All right. Good. Chris Piehota, thank you very much. Eric Bolling, thank you for doing me this favor. I'll pay you back soon. 4 minutes and 35 seconds. Whoever wins the war on affordability, that is what the midterm's about. I know I'm talking about something else. I know we're always talking about something else. But that is what is going to matter on Election Day. Okay? And the president knows that. The president is going on an affordability tour because he says, wait a minute, the Democrats broke affordability. I'm the fixer, right? That was my campaign. Well, the left now says, well, that's not what the polls say. That's not what the polls say. The polls say you're the problem. And people are on our side. We have the outrage now. What's the state of play? Next. Affordability is the new hot keyword for the economy. It's the #1 issue in America, ahead of immigration and ahead of health care. But I think health care is part of affordability. So the question is, whose issue is this in terms of advantage? Let's discuss with former Trump White House spokesperson Harrison Fields and the man running for Nancy Pelosi's seat in Congress and AOC's former chief of staff, Saikat Chakrabarti. Saikat, good luck to you. It's good to have you. I try to have your boss come on all the time, but, you know, people play favorites these days, and this is not the home team on NewsNation, to be sure. All right, so let's talk about this. The president's perspective, Harrison, is, wait a minute. The Democrats created the cost of living problem. That's what I ran on. I'm Mr. Gas and Groceries. I'm going to go out into the country and remind everybody how much better I've done than they. How is that going to go for him next week?
Well, good evening, Chris, and thank you for having me on. It's going to go well. He has a good story to tell. Remember, he just passed historic tax relief for the American people in one big, beautiful bill, which they will feel when the clock strikes midnight in 2026. You also look at the jobs numbers, continuing to beat expectations. And if you look at who's actually getting these jobs, it's native-born Americans. It is not foreign-born workers who were really gobbling up the last the jobs in the last administration. And if you look at home ownership, Secretary Scott Turner mentioned we have 1 million new homeowners, and about 500,000 of them are first-time homeowners in this country. Look at mortgage rates. Mortgage rates are collapsing, which is good for new families like mine trying to purchase a home. Look at gas, groceries, and rent. All of them are making strides. Remember, it's only been 11 months. The president has been doing everything possible to make sure this economy is turning around after the 4 years of devastation from the Democrats like AOC and Nancy Pelosi, who really got this economy in the gutter. The president is working hard to fix it.
Okay, Saikat, just to be clear, 5 years ago, the mortgage rates were on the average of somewhere in the area of 3%. Now you're lucky if you can get one just a little under 7%. So they're not collapsing. They've come down a little bit, but your argument is taken in context. Saikat, you are smiling all along as if your job is easy on this. Why?
I mean, it's not my job. It's just trying to face reality here. Because you look at these numbers since Trump's taken office, inflation has been going up. Unemployment's been going up. I mean, like the housing stuff, come on. You ask anybody trying to buy a house right now, you ask young people trying to buy a house right now, you're going to go with that argument? I mean, look, I want you guys to go with this argument that this is all Joe Biden's fault. Because the American people, they know that Republicans control the House, they control the Senate, they control the presidency. So keep going with trying to blame the past. People actually want stuff to be fixed. That's why Donald Trump got elected. People elected him because they expected him to fix the economy. They expect him to build back a high-wage manufacturing industry. And guess what? Manufacturing jobs have plummeted since Donald Trump's been in office. So you guys are failing, and guess what's going to happen on January 1st? Healthcare premiums are going to skyrocket. Medicaid benefits are going to get cut. And that's not something that's happening to the economy. That is something that Republicans have done to the American people. So keep going with your excuses. I think it's weak. I think the American people are going to see through it.
Harrison, do you think that's why the president is bombing the drug boats and doing other things to distract from this issue instead of just banging on who's better on the economy?
Not at all. He's the president of the United States. He has to focus on domestic issues, but he also has to focus on international issues as well. Listen, if you look at the border, it's secure. If you look at the economy, the president's trying to turn it around from the last 4 years of devastation under the Democratic Party. If you look at leadership on the world stage, it's back. If you look at the president's ability to secure peace, not just in the Middle East, but around the world, look at Congo and Rwanda, historic peace agreement signed yesterday. The president is achieving that. He is walking and chewing gum, unlike the previous president that could barely walk, and all he did was chew gum in his sleep. So we've got a president that's actually doing his job every single day, despite Democrat objections in the House. Every single Democrat voted against historic tax relief for the American people because they said it's so-called tax cuts for the rich. Meanwhile, if you are a waitress, if you're an Uber driver, if you're a senior, no taxes on tips, no taxes on overtime, no taxes on Social Security, all will be coming in 2026. Not to mention Trump accounts, in which if you have a newborn baby in 2026, you now have the ability to have seed money so that when your child is 18, they will be sitting at around $40,000 in a bank account in which they can go and hopefully buy a new home or pay for college. So this is what the Republican Party is doing, and I would implore your guest to talk about what he's running on, because the Democratic policies have failed us. Look at the so-called Inflation Reduction Act. Did nothing to reduce inflation. All the Zoran Mandanis of the world want to do is tax and spend their way out of the problems and really tell the American people they're going to give them everything in the kitchen sink, and they failed to deliver. This president is delivering. Remember what he did the first 4 years. He will continue to do that in these 4 years. Give him some time. The president is on a mission to help the American people.
I'm giving Saikat the last word. Harrison, I appreciate you. Just, two quick things. I like the savings accounts. I think they should be opened up to workers who don't qualify for employer-defined benefits, 401k, and not just kids. I think that's something that should be on the table. We'll see which side tries to own that. And the tax cuts, once you get above the top, they're not permanent, they're temporary, and they're nowhere near as beneficial as what the top gets, which is why the tax cuts aren't as easy a win, I think, as the right thought they would be. But I take your arguments, and you're always welcome here to make them. Saikat, to answer Harrison's question, what are you for in terms of what you think the Democrats can offer that's better than the Trump administration?
Look, something I do agree with you on, Harrison, is that this affordability problem, it's something that's getting supercharged by Trump, but it predates Trump. It's been predating Trump for decades. I actually think it's the driving reason we had someone like Barack Obama get elected, because he was running on bold, sweeping change. And I think it's why Donald Trump got elected in 2016 and 2024. And the thing is, you're not going to be able to tackle affordability with whack-a-mole policy. Like a 50-year mortgage rate, that's not going to do it on its own. Just doing a tariff here or there, that's not going to do it. You need an actual plan. You have to build systems that replace a lot of the broken systems we have right now. So when it comes to healthcare, yeah, I'm for single-payer healthcare. I think we need a new healthcare system because the ACA is simply not working, right? When it comes to housing, you got to actually fund and build millions of units of housing in this country to get supply up. When it comes to energy, we have to produce so much energy. You need a real plan to do that. It's not going to happen by just giving tax cuts to the rich and hoping they sprinkle that back into the economy. That is not working. So, I've worked on plans to actually create energy abundance. Trump ran on energy abundance, but then he's canceling solar projects and wind projects all over the country. I think that's just not serious. You actually have to do this stuff in a coherent way, and it's not going to cut it to just do a thing here, a thing there, because this is a deep, deep problem. It's at the root of our problems in our economy, and until we fix it, the pendulum's going to keep swinging back and forth.
It's an important seat you're running for. I know that whoever you're running against is going to wind up yelling at me and want time on the show, and I'll give it to him because I'm going to cover the race all along, Saikat, and you're welcome here to make the case. And Harrison, you're always welcome to make the case here as well. Whichever side can figure out how to get us to go back to where we were, not in a MAGA, Make America Great Again way, but when we worked off Keynesian economics, and people can Google this and figure it out, and not Milton Friedman economics, where you didn't have to give the most money you could just to shareholders. This country did way better for more people than it is right now. Who can get us back to that and how? We'll see. Saikat, good luck to you. Harrison, good luck to you. I'll see you both again soon. 4 minutes and 30 seconds. Two big decisions by the courts today, so I'm bringing in my mentor, the Dersh. Birthright citizenship. The Supreme Court granted certiorari to review the president's executive order. They granted cert. Does that mean they think he did something right here? Dershowitz will explain. And they're releasing the grand jury testimony in the Epstein case. That's what we've been waiting for, right? No, it isn't. Wait, no? Dersh has the answer to that, too. Next. Alan Dershowitz of Harvard Law fame comes in to help me once again understand two big legal stories today. Alan, thank you very much, Professor. You see his book there, The Preventative State, worth the read. So first, the small ball, then the big ball. For those who believe that the grand jury testimony is where you will find these 20 or so names, what do you want them to know?
No, not at all. The grand jury just gets what the prosecution wants them to have, the minimum amount necessary to get an indictment. And as I said from the beginning, you're not going to get much from the grand jury minutes. What you're going to get a lot from is depositions in civil cases, which have been suppressed by federal judges. What we need is two things. We need to find out who's really guilty, whether there are really names on the list of people who had sex with underage girls. That's one. That's important. Everybody's for that. But the other thing is we have to find out how many of these alleged victims are liars who have gotten money. They never met Jeffrey Epstein. They never saw Jeffrey Epstein. They just lined up and got $50,000, $100,000. Some of them made false accusations. We know that the Farmer sisters made false accusations. We know that Ransom made false accusations. I'm not allowed to comment about the person who accused me and then withdrew her accusations. But we have to have both sides. Otherwise, it's McCarthyism. What I'm worried about is there are people in Congress who say they're going to give a list of 20 names and they're going to immunize themselves and everybody else from having accountability for that. We need both sides of the story. That comes out in the depositions, because in the depositions, you have both sides represented, whereas in the grand jury minutes, it's only the prosecution who's represented. So this is going to give us nothing.
They are not fighting to have those unsealed yet, as far as we know. I don't know what all this redacting is about. We'll see once those files come out. But you and I are going to have this conversation again when everybody's saying, wait, they're not here, they're not here. And I am going to go at Representative Massey. If he has the names that the survivors gave him, I've never heard of a survivor or their lawyer not bringing forth names of people who had culpability or responsibility. But he has one now to release the names. Let me ask you about the other one. So if the Supreme Court granted cert on the birthright citizenship executive order, that must mean that they must be leaning toward thinking he had a good order here. What should people know?
Well, not necessarily. You need 4 votes for cert.
Right.
You need 5 votes to reverse. Usually, in a case like this, 4 won't vote for cert unless they have a 5th in their pocket as well. Remember that what's being challenged is a very narrow executive order. The executive order says, look, anybody who's born in the United States is still going to be a citizen. But if you're born to a mother who was here unlawfully, a father who is not a citizen, say somebody who just came for a visit, and they were born here, and they have no allegiance to the United States, the argument is that they're not subject to the 4th Amendment, because the 14th Amendment says born in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof, subject to the jurisdiction. So if Congress were to pass a law saying that people born to a mother who's not here lawfully, a father who's not here lawfully, are not subject to the American jurisdiction, that becomes a closer case. But Congress hasn't passed that law. What Congress has done is general laws. And so the executive order focuses on that. So I think we may see a very narrow decision, sending it back to the courts to analyze the situation in light of what Congress has done, could do, and might do in the future. So I don't think we're going to see a big decision saying that we now revoke the 14th Amendment and people born in the United States are no longer citizens. The vast majority of people born in this country are going to remain citizens merely by virtue of their birth under the 14th Amendment.
The president wants this. The political optics are as much as the legalities, but I love your analysis. Professor Dershowitz, thank you very, very much for it.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
And good Shabbos. 4 minutes and 15 seconds. Up next, you have your say. 844-968-7720. I better not hear about that damn raccoon, because let me tell you, a couple of his cousins were looking at me in my driveway tonight. First question.
Okay, rapid fire tonight. Donald from Washington State.
What's your question?
Hello, Chris. Hey, everybody keeps scrutinizing Donald Trump on the economy and everything, but let's go back to the Ronald Reagan era when he took over from what Carter did to this country, made it weak and everything, but Ronald Reagan stated you will not see the results in at least 10 years. And Donald Trump...
it's not... That's right, but that's not what Donald Trump said.
Overnight.
Donald Trump said day one. Donald Trump said he'd bring him down right away. And that's the problem with campaigning versus governing. That's why my father said you campaign in poetry, you govern in prose, which was a very gentle way of saying these guys are full of it when they want your vote, and then they get in and they say, oh, it's all too hard. And he wanted the job, now he's got to do the job. Next.
Okay, we can't go into the weekend without Mr. Positive.
Oh, Mr. Positive, my man, how you doing?
Brother CC, what do you think about the grand jury choosing not to re-indict Letitia James?
It is proof that it is lawfare. And this is me saying it as someone who believes that she railroaded my brother, and she had me go through a horrible day of a phalanx of lawyers asking me about things that they knew I had nothing to do with. And I still believe this was a case that was brought because of her politics, not because of her culpability. And if you can't get a grand jury indictment, you suck, and there's no case. Next. I love you, Mr. Positive. I'll talk to you on text.
Okay, Debbie, you got a minute from Phoenix.
Deb.
Hi, Chris. I love your show. I've been watching since CNN, but I get so tired of listening to you go on and on about the pod bros. If I wanted to hear pod bro opinions and social media, I would go there instead of watching your show.
Okay, fair criticism. My problem is they dominate. They dominate. Our politics, our media, all keys off social media now. And it's not just about their growing share or anything, even the finances. It's what we talk about and how we talk about it. So what am I supposed to do? Ignore that? That's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to expose what it is that's causing the problem with the division, because I don't believe it's legacy media. I believe they say that about legacy media. They even use the term legacy media just to justify doing everything worse on digital media, and Bongino and Kash Patel are perfect examples of that. And now they're saying, well, it's just entertainment. On this side, we do it a different way. That's bullshit. That's just not true. But I accept your criticism. All right, we'll be right back. You know, I was thinking in the break about what one of the callers was saying. If I wanted the Pod Bros, I'd go to the Pod Bros. I think that she is the exception, not the rule, in terms of political consumption. But I have to tell you, it is not easy to see what succeeds, what is celebrated, what resonates, what is literally designed to work in the media and decide to do something different. Especially, you know, because it is a business, right? News business. You do have to do well if you want to have a platform and reach so that you can do anything good. It is tricky, but I really believe, and maybe it's because I'm, you know, later stage in my career, I don't want to be a part of what I know the problem is. I really don't. Leland Vittert starts right now.
Well, Chris, you are part of the solution. Honored to be along with the journey with you on that. Good to see you. Have a great weekend.